Welcome to David's Stories. Today we follow Ralph, a father estranged from his daughter Naomi, who receives a mysterious letter sparking hope and deception. Uncovering a cruel scam, he seeks truth leading to family reconciliation. Subscribe and hit the bell for weekly tales of mystery and redemption. Share your thoughts below. Let's start the story. The mailbox creaked as I opened it, the rusted hinge groaning like an old wound. It was August 31st, a date carved into my heart with the precision of a blade. Naomi's birthday. 3 years had passed since I'd last heard her voice, her laugh, her quick-witted retorts that used to light up our Sunday calls. 3 years of silence, heavy as a storm cloud, and yet there it was, a single white envelope, perched atop the usual pile of bills and junk mail. My pulse quickened. A traitor to the discipline I'd forced upon myself not to hope. I stood frozen on the cracked pavement of our Evanston driveway, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward the envelope, as if the world itself urged me to pick it up. The handwriting was unmistakable, or so I thought. Naomi's careful looping script spelled out my name, Ralph Emerson, with a precision that felt like a ghost reaching out from the past. I turned the envelope over, my fingers trembling, and saw the return address. Her Lincoln Park apartment, the same place where everything had shattered 3 years ago. Minnie, my voice broke as I called for my wife, the screen door slamming behind me as I rushed up the front steps. The house smelled of fresh bread and lemon cleaner, a sanctuary of routine that had kept us grounded through the ache of Naomi's absence. Minnie, come quick. She appeared from the kitchen, her gray eyes narrowing behind her glasses, a dish towel still clutched in her hands. What's all this shouting about? Ralph? Her tone was half annoyed, half curious, but when her gaze landed on the envelope, her expression shifted. Surprise flickered across her face like a candle catching a draft. Look at this! I held it up, the paper trembling in my grip. It's from Naomi. Today of all days. Minnie stepped closer, adjusting her glasses with a practiced flick. That's her handwriting, all right, she said, her voice softening. She touched my arm, her fingers warm and steady. Are you sure you're ready for this? I didn't answer right away. The envelope felt heavier than it should, as if it carried not just words but the weight of 3 lost years. I held it to the light, studying the way the ink caught the sun. The curves of Naomi's letters glowing like a cipher, meant only for me. I keep thinking, I whispered, this might be it. Maybe she's ready to talk. The living room was bathed in golden light, the kind that made our modest home feel like a cathedral on quiet afternoons. Outside, neighbors laughed, children shrieked in their yards, and cars hummed past, oblivious to the seismic shift happening inside our walls. Time had stopped for us, suspended in the possibility of reconciliation. Minnie settled into the armchair beside me, her presence a quiet anchor. Whatever it says, we'll face it together, she said. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. 3 years of hoping, of failed attempts, of lying awake, wondering if I'd been too harsh, too stubborn. 3 years of missing Naomi's voice, her sharp mind, the way she'd tease me about my old-fashioned sweaters. The envelope seemed to pulse in my hands, loaded with possibilities. Forgiveness, an invitation to be part of her life again, or, God forbid, another rejection. Another door slammed shut. I set it on the coffee table, afraid to tear it open, afraid not to. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint tick of the kitchen clock. She remembered I'd be thinking of her today, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Minnie's hand found mine, her grip firm. She always was thoughtful like that. The memory hit me like a wave, sharp and unbidden. Not of the recent years, but of Naomi as a child, racing down these same stairs in her pajamas, her eyes bright with the promise of birthday mornings. Before life got complicated, before Ethan, before the world turned us into strangers. I picked up the envelope again, studying the careful way she'd written our address. No mistakes. No crossed-out letters. She'd taken time with this, planned it. That had to mean something. I can't remember the last time I felt this nervous. I admitted my fingers tracing the edges of the paper. August 31st, 2022. Minnie said quietly, her voice heavy with memory. The day you drove to her apartment to talk sense into her. The weight of that day settled over me like fog. That terrible afternoon when I'd stood outside Naomi's Lincoln Park apartment, my finger hovering over her doorbell, convinced I could save her from Ethan's lies. I'd been so sure I was right, so certain I could make her see the truth. Instead, I'd lost her. But maybe today was different. Maybe this letter was the bridge I'd been praying for. I held my breath, my thumb brushing the envelope's flap. "Here goes nothing," I murmured, ready to tear it open. "Wait!" Minnie's voice cut through the room like a blade, sharp and urgent. I froze my finger halfway under the flap. "What's wrong?" She leaned closer, squinting at the address through her glasses. "Give me another look at that handwriting." Her tone was strange, laced with something I couldn't place. Doubt, fear, maybe both. "Minnie, what's going on?" My heart thudded a warning drumbeat. She took the envelope from my hands, holding it up to the window's dying light. "Look at the slant of your name. See it?" Her finger traced the letters with the precision of a detective. Naomi's writing always slanted right. Always. This slants left. I stared at the letters, irritation prickling at the edges of my hope. "It looks fine to me." "No, Ralph." Her voice was firm, the kind she used when grading papers when she knew something was off. 30 years of teaching taught me to notice these things. The pressure's wrong, too. Naomi presses hard when she writes like she's carving the words into the page. These letters are too light, too delicate. My chest tightened, a different kind of fear creeping in. "You're imagining things, Minnie. Am I?" She held the envelope at arm's length, then close again, her eyes narrowing. "Look at the A in Ralph. Naomi's A's are round like little moons. This one's pointed sharp. And the F, too many loops, too fancy. She never wrote like that." I wanted to argue, to cling to the fragile hope I'd built, but doubt seeped in like cold water. The more I looked, the more the differences stood out. The spacing, the rhythm, the way the pen seemed to hesitate where Naomi's would have danced. "Handwriting changes," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Not this much." Minnie countered, her tone softening as she saw the devastation creeping into my expression. "Not the fundamentals. This isn't her, Ralph. Someone's trying to copy her style, but they got it wrong." The envelope felt heavier now, not with promise, but with deceit. Someone had gone to the trouble of mimicking Naomi's handwriting, of using our pain against us. The cruelty of it stole my breath. "Who would do this?" I started, then stopped, my mind racing. "I don't know," Minnie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this isn't from our daughter." The room seemed to darken, the golden light boding as if the sun itself had turned away. The envelope lay between us on the coffee table, no longer a beacon of hope, but a puzzle, a trap. Outside, the world continued, children laughing, cars passing, but inside, we were caught in a web of questions. Who knew enough about us to craft this? Who knew Naomi's birthday, her handwriting, our estrangement? "And why maybe I'm wrong?" Minnie offered, seeing the way my shoulders slumped. "Maybe she changed her style, or—" "No," I said, the word flat and final. "You're right. I see it now." The careful hope I'd built over the past 10 minutes crumbled like ash. Someone was playing games with us, and the realization burned. "We have to open it," I said, my voice steadier now, fueled by a growing anger. "We need to know what they want." Minnie nodded, her reluctance palpable. "Whatever it is, it won't be good." I tore open the envelope, the sound of ripping paper sharp in the quiet room. My hands moved mechanically, hope replaced by grim determination. If someone thought they could prey on our love for Naomi, they'd underestimated me. I unfolded the single sheet of paper, my eyes scanning the words as Minnie leaned against my shoulder. "Dear Dad." I read aloud, my voice catching on the word that once felt like home. But even as I spoke, the words felt wrong, hollow, like a stranger wearing my daughter's face. "Read it all," Minnie urged, her voice trembling. I cleared my throat and continued. I desperately need your help. I'm in the hospital and require emergency surgery that my insurance won't cover. The doctors say I need $15,000 immediately, or I might not survive. Minnie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, Ralph, I know we haven't talked in years. I continued, the words tasting bitter, but you're the only one I can turn to. Please don't let our past disagreements prevent you from saving your daughter's life. I need you to transfer the money to this cryptocurrency wallet. I stumbled over the string of letters and numbers, a cold, impersonal code that felt like a mockery. Time is critical. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning, and they won't proceed without payment. I'm sorry it took a crisis to reach out, but I'm desperate. Please help me, Dad. Your loving daughter, Naomi. The letter slipped from my hands, fluttering to the table like a wounded bird. That's not her, Minnie said immediately, her voice sharp with certainty. She never called you Dad in letters. Always Daddy, or your name. And cryptocurrency Naomi's in IT. She'd use a bank transfer, not this nonsense. I nodded, disgust rising in my throat. The letter was a lie crafted to exploit a father's desperation. It lacked Naomi's warmth, her personality, the little quirks that made her letters feel alive. Who does this? I growled, my voice cracking with rage. Who targets a family like this? Someone who knows us. Minnie said, her analytical mind cutting through the shock. They knew Naomi's name, our address, that we've been estranged. This isn't random. The implications hit like a punch. Someone had studied us, had weaponized our pain with surgical precision. The violation felt like a physical wound, raw and deep. 15,000, I said, staring at the number. They thought we'd fall for it. You almost did, Minnie said gently, her eyes searching mine. 5 minutes ago you were ready to believe every word. She was right. I would have called banks, scrambled to send money, anything to save my daughter. The scammer had counted on my love, my guilt, my aching need to hear from her. I stood abruptly, the letters still on the table. I need to call her. Now. I need to know she's safe. Minnie nodded, but her expression was grim. And we need to find out who did this. I grabbed the kitchen phone, its black receiver worn smooth from years of family conversations. My fingers dialed Naomi's number, etched into my memory despite the years of silence. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then her voicemail clicked on. Her voice, professional and distant, was a knife to my chest. Naomi, it's your father. Call me back. It's urgent. I hung up and dialed again, pacing the linoleum floor. Same result. Voicemail. Naomi, something's happened. Someone sent a fake letter pretending to be you. I need to know you're okay. Call me. My voice broke on the last word, a plea I hadn't meant to let slip. 3rd try. My hands shook now, anger and fear blurring together. Naomi, someone's using your name to scam us. I need to know if you're safe. Please call me. I slammed the receiver down, the sound echoing in the quiet kitchen. She's not answering, I said, though Minnie already knew. What if he's screening her calls? What if she's in trouble? Minnie stepped closer, her hand on my shoulder. Ralph, your blood pressure. You're getting worked up. Of course I'm worked up. I snapped, then softened, hating the edge in my voice. Someone's targeting our family, Minnie, using our pain to steal from us. And Naomi won't even take my call. The letter lay on the counter, its cryptocurrency address mocking me with its cold, random string of characters. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door. I'm going to her apartment. Ralph, no? Minnie's voice was firm. You know how that went last time? This is different, I said, my resolve hardening. I'm not going to lecture her. I'm going to warn her someone's using her name for fraud. She has a right to know. Minnie's eyes searched mine, worry etched into every line of her face. Be careful, Ralph. My heart's been broken for 3 years, I said, forcing a grim smile. A little confrontation won't make it worse. I stepped into the garage. the envelope tucked into my jacket pocket. Its weight a reminder of the mystery I was determined to unravel. Someone had dared to use my daughter's name against me, and I wouldn't rest until I knew who and why. The envelope sat on the coffee table like a cursed artifact, its white edges glowing faintly in the dimming light of our living room. My fingers still tingled from where I'd torn it open, the weight of its deceit pressing against my chest. Minnie's words echoed in my mind. "This isn't from our daughter." The truth of it burned, but it also stirred something deeper, a memory of the day. Everything broke the day I lost Naomi. I sank into the kitchen chair, the unopened letter still clutched in my hands, and let the past pull me under. It was August 31st, 2022, Naomi's 35th birthday, when I'd stood outside her Lincoln Park apartment, the city's pulse thrumming around me. The air was thick with the scent of summer asphalt and distant lake water, and the neighborhood buzzed with life, young professionals in tailored suits, couples walking, designer dogs, joggers weaving through the crowd. I'd driven there with a fire in my gut, convinced I could save my daughter from the man who was unraveling her life. Ethan. His name alone tasted like bile. I'd known something was wrong for months. It started with small things: Naomi's calls becoming shorter, her laughter less frequent, her excuses for missing Sunday dinners more elaborate. Then came the casino receipts I'd found in their car, tucked into the glove compartment when I helped them move a bookshelf. Won $200 in one night. The numbers stared up at me, cold and damning, a ledger of someone's ruin. I'd confronted Naomi gently at first, but her defensiveness only fueled my resolve. Ethan was trouble, and I couldn't let her drown in his mistakes. That day I stood outside her building, my finger hovering over the intercom. The sleek glass facade of the apartment complex loomed over me, a monument to Naomi's success and her distance from us. She'd built a life here, one that didn't include her old man in his worn-out work boots and flannel shirts. I pressed the buzzer, my heart pounding like a war drum. The speaker crackled, and after a moment her voice came through, tired but sharp. "Who is it?" "It's me, sweetheart. Your dad." A pause long enough to make my stomach twist. Then the door buzzed, and I was let in. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt like an eternity, the mirrored walls reflecting a man I barely recognized, gray at the temples, eyes heavy with worry. When Naomi opened her door, my breath caught. She looked older than 35. Her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, dark circles framing her eyes. Her posture, usually so confident, sagged as if the world had pressed too hard on her shoulders. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Her voice was guarded, a wall already rising between us. "We need to talk," I said, stepping forward. "About your marriage. About Ethan." Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing. "If this is about him again, it's about you making the biggest mistake of your life." I cut in, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "He's gambling away your future, Naomi. I saw the receipts. $1,200 in one night. How many nights like that have there been?" She stepped back, her arms crossing like a shield. "You were snooping in our car. I was helping you move that bookshelf, and papers fell out." "Don't change the subject." My voice rose, fueled by months of worry. "He's dragging you down with him." That's when Ethan appeared behind her, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. He was all charm and polish, expensive haircut, tailored shirt, a smile that could sell you a dream and leave you broke. "Ralph," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth, "what brings you by uninvited?" "I'm talking to my daughter," I snapped, "about the casino receipts in your car. $1,200, Ethan. That's not a work event. That's an addiction." Naomi's face went pale, but Ethan's smile didn't waver. "Client entertainment," he said smoothly. "You know how business works." "Don't lie to me," I shot back. "I know the difference between business and a man who's lost control." Naomi's voice exploded, raw and jagged. "This is my life, Dad. My marriage, my decisions. When are you going to stop treating me like a child?" "When you stop acting like one." The words slipped out before I could stop them, cutting deeper than I'd meant. This man is destroying your credit, your savings, everything you've worked for. And you're letting him." Her eyes glistened, but not with tears, with anger. "You don't know what you're talking about. You never accepted my choices. Never. We questioned this choice because we love you," I said, my voice breaking. "What about family, Naomi? Doesn't that mean anything anymore?" "Family," she laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You mean the family that never trusted me? That questioned every decision I made?" Ethan stepped forward, his voice silky, practiced. "Maybe it's time for some space, Ralph. Let Naomi make her own choices without interference." I saw it then, the way his words slid into her like a key into a lock. Her face hardened, her shoulders straightening as she absorbed his manipulation. "He's right, Dad," she said, her voice cold. "I think you should leave." "Naomi, please," I pleaded. "Just think about what I'm saying." "I'm thinking," she said, her eyes locked on mine, unyielding. "And I'm choosing my husband over your suspicions." The door closed with a soft click, but it echoed like a gunshot in my chest. I stood there staring at the polished wood, willing it to open again. It didn't. The drive home was a blur, the city's lights streaking past like tears I refused to shed. That was the last time I saw her, the last time I heard her voice, until the letter arrived today. Back in the present, the kitchen felt colder. The memory a weight I couldn't shake. I set the fake letter down, my hands trembling. "I should have handled it differently," I said to Minnie, my voice barely audible. I pushed too hard. "You were trying to protect her," Minnie said, her hand resting on mine. "You couldn't have known how far Ethan would go." But I had known. Deep down, I'd seen the predator in Ethan's eyes, the way he moved like a shadow, always one step ahead. I'd spent the next 3 years trying to bridge the gap I'd widened that day. I called her the next morning, then the day after, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. "Hi, sweetheart," I'd say, my voice cracking. "It's Dad. I'm sorry about yesterday. Can we talk?" "Just coffee, maybe?" She never called back. By October, Ethan started answering her phone. "She doesn't want to talk to you, Ralph," he'd say, his tone smooth as glass. "Let me hear that from her," I'd demand, but he'd just laugh, the line going dead. I tried driving to her apartment twice in November. The first time, Ethan met me in the lobby, his expensive suit making my workman's clothes feel like a costume. "This has to stop," he said, blocking the elevator. "You're causing her stress." "I'm causing her stress," I'd shot back. "What about what you're doing to her bank account?" His smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold like a snake's. "Careful, old man. Harassment is a serious charge." The second visit was worse. He met me at my car before I could even reach the building, his phone already in hand. "I warned you," he said. "One more visit and I'm calling the police. Naomi doesn't want to see you." Christmas was the hardest. I'd always been the one to pick out Naomi's gifts, spending weeks searching for something perfect. That year I chose a leather journal, the kind she'd loved in college, her initials embossed in gold. It came back unopened, stamped, "Return to sender" in red ink. My birthday cards, Minnie's Mother's Day, flowers. Everything came back the same way, each rejection, a stone added to the wall between us. Last spring, I made one final attempt. I'd heard through a mutual friend that Naomi's IT company had moved to a new building downtown. I took a sick day and waited in the lobby, my heart pounding as I watched the revolving doors. When she appeared walking with colleagues, she looked thinner, tired, but still beautiful. Still my little girl. "Naomi," I called, stepping forward. She turned, and for a split second I saw something like longing in her eyes. Then it vanished, her face shutting like a vault. "Dad, you can't be here." "Just 5 minutes," I pleaded. "We used to talk about anything." Her colleague slowed, sensing drama. She stepped closer, her voice low. "Ethan will be furious if he finds out you were here." "Then don't tell him," I said. "This is between us." "Nothing is just between us anymore," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I made my choice." "You can unmake it," I said, desperate. "It's not too late." She shook her head, tears threatening. "It is too late." She walked away, leaving me in a sterile corporate lobby surrounded by strangers who pretended not to stare. That night I told Minnie I was done trying. Some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt. But now, sitting in our kitchen with this fake letter, I felt the stirrings of something new. Not hope, but a spark of defiance. Someone had dared to use Naomi's name to hurt us, and that was a line I couldn't let pass. I stood the chair scraping against the floor. "I'm going to her apartment," I said again, my voice steady now. "Ralph, think this through," Minnie said, her eyes wide with worry. "What if she thinks you made this up? What if Ethan's there? Then I'll show her the letter," I said, grabbing my jacket. "Let her see the handwriting that isn't hers, the scam that's too cold to be real. She needs to know someone's targeting us." Minnie followed me to the door, her hand catching my arm. "Promise me you'll be careful. Your heart can't take another fight like last time." I looked into her eyes, seeing the woman who'd stood by me through every storm. "I'll be careful," I promised. "But I can't sit here while someone uses our daughter's name to hurt us." The garage door rattled as I opened it, the cool evening air hitting me like a slap. I slid into the driver's seat, the fake letter tucked into my pocket, its weight a constant reminder of the mystery I was unraveling. As I backed out of the driveway, Minnie's silhouette stood in the window, her face etched with worry. The road to Lincoln Park stretched ahead, a 45-minute drive through the fading light, giving me too much time to think. Who could have crafted this letter? Who knew enough about our family to time it for Naomi's birthday, to mimic her handwriting with such chilling precision? The questions gnawed at me, each one a thread in a tapestry of deceit. Ethan was the obvious suspect, his gambling debts a dark shadow over Naomi's life. But was he capable of something this cruel, this calculated? Or was there someone else? Someone watching from the edges, pulling strings we couldn't yet see. The city loomed closer, Chicago's skyline rising like a fortress of glass and steel. Traffic thickened as I merged onto Lakeshore Drive, the lake stretching endlessly to my right, its surface glinting under gathering clouds. A storm was coming. I could feel it, not just in the air but in the pit of my stomach. This letter wasn't just a scam, it was a message, a challenge. Someone wanted to exploit our pain, and I was determined to find out who. As I drove, memories of Naomi flooded back, each one sharper than the last. Her first birthday, when she'd smeared cake across her face and laughed until she couldn't breathe. The summer she was 10, when we'd spent hours at the park feeding ducks, her small hand in mine as she named each one. The day she graduated college, her smile brighter than the sun, as she hugged me and whispered, "Thanks for believing in me, Daddy." Those moments were real, unbreakable, and no amount of silence could erase them. But Ethan had tried. I saw it now, the way he'd wormed his way into her life, isolating her with his charm, his lies. He'd built a wall between us, brick by brick, until Naomi couldn't see the love on the other side. The letter in my pocket was proof of his desperation, or someone else's. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, the city's lights blurring as I pushed forward. Lincoln Park came into view, its tree-lined streets and upscale townhouses, a stark contrast to our modest Evanston home. Naomi had chosen this world, one of success and independence. But at what cost? I parked 2 blocks from her townhouse feeding quarters into the meter, with shaking hands. The walk would give me time to prepare, to find the words that might reach her without pushing her further away. The neighborhood was alive with the hum of Saturday evening laughter from a nearby barbecue, children playing in a park, the distant pulse of music. Normal lives, normal families, untouched by the shadows that clung to ours. Naomi's townhouse stood at the end of the block, 3 stories of red brick, with black shutters, a small garden blooming with flowers I didn't recognize. The lights were on, casting a warm glow through the windows. Someone was home. I stood at the bottom of her steps, staring at the burgundy door with its brass knocker and security panel. 3 years since I'd last stood here. 3 years since she'd chosen Ethan over me. My finger hovered over the doorbell, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. This wasn't about rehashing old fights. This was about protecting her from a lie that wore her name. I pressed the button, the chime echoing through the house like a summons. Footsteps approached, quick light, the kind I remembered from Naomi's childhood. The peephole darkened, then lightened as if someone had looked through and hesitated. Locks turned and the door opened. Naomi stood there, older but unmistakable. Her dark hair was shorter, styled in a way that made her look both sophisticated and distant. She wore a casual dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "Dad." Her voice was flat, caught between surprise and wariness. "Hello, Naomi," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to ask you something important." Her brow furrowed as I reached into my pocket and pulled out the letter. "Did you write this?" She took it, her eyes scanning the handwriting, confusion replacing her guarded expression. "I didn't write this," she said, her voice sharp. "Where did you get it?" "It came today, on your birthday." I watched her closely, searching for any sign she knew more than she let on. "Dad, I haven't written to you in 3 years." Her voice carried conviction, but also hurt, as if my question proved I didn't know her anymore. "This isn't mine." "Then who did?" I asked, my tone sharper than I'd meant. "Who would forge your handwriting to ask for $15,000? Her eyes flicked to the letter, then back to me. "You tell me. You're the one who brought it here." "I'm not accusing you, Naomi," I said, my voice softening. "I'm trying to protect you. Someone used your name, your handwriting, to scam us. They knew about our estrangement, your birthday, everything." Behind her I caught a glimpse of movement. Ethan stepped into the hallway, his expensive casual clothes a stark contrast to the tension in the air. "Naomi, who is it?" he asked, though his eyes locked on mine, calculating. "My father," she said, her voice tight. "Apparently someone's been sending fake letters from me asking for money." Ethan's face showed concern, but something flickered in his eyes, too quick, too guarded. "That sounds like a scam," he said smoothly. "You should report it to the police, Ralph." "Maybe I will," I said, studying him. Strange coincidence, though. $15,000. That's about what someone might lose in a bad night at the casino. His jaw tightened just for a moment before his smile returned. "I wouldn't know anything about that." "Dad." "That's enough," Naomi said, stepping closer to Ethan, her body language protective. "You can't just show up making accusations." "I'm not accusing," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I'm asking questions. Someone targeted our family, Naomi. Someone who knows us." "Anyone could find that information online," Ethan said dismissively, his hand resting on Naomi's shoulder. "Could they?" I countered. "Could they know your wife's handwriting, our estrangement?" "Her birthday." Naomi's eyes darted between us, uncertainty creeping in. "Dad, you need to leave," she said, her voice final. "I didn't write that letter. I don't know who did, and I can't help you." "Can't or won't?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She started to close the door. "Don't come back without calling first." "I tried calling," I said. 3 times. "You didn't answer." "Then take the hint." The door closed with a soft click, leaving me standing on the steps, the letter burning a hole in my pocket. I walked back to my car, the evening air heavy with the promise of rain. Naomi hadn't written the letter, that much was clear. But Ethan's reaction, the flicker in his eyes, the way he'd positioned himself between us, set my nerves on edge. He was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. The kitchen was silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the clock in the next room. The envelope lay between Minnie and me on the coffee table, its pristine white surface, now a mocking presence, a riddle wrapped in deceit. My fingers hovered over the torn flap, the weight of Minnie's warning. "This isn't from our daughter," settling into my bones like frost. The hope that had surged through me only minutes ago, the fragile dream of Naomi reaching out, had crumbled into something darker, something I couldn't yet name. I looked at Minnie, her gray eyes sharp behind her glasses, and saw the same storm brewing in her that churned in me. "Minnie, what do you mean it's not hers?" My voice came out rough-edged with a desperation I couldn't hide. It's her handwriting. Her address. It came on her birthday. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for the envelope. Her movements deliberate, almost reverent, as if handling evidence in a crime scene. She held it up to the fading afternoon light streaming through the living room window, the sun casting long shadows that danced across the paper. "Look closer, Ralph," she said, her voice low, steady, the tone she used when she'd caught a student cheating on a test. "Look at the slant." I leaned in, my heart thudding against my ribs. The handwriting was so familiar, Naomi's careful loops, the way she crossed her T's with a flourish, the precise spacing between letters. But as Minnie tilted the envelope, the light revealed subtleties I'd missed in my eagerness. The letters slanted left, not right, a subtle deviation that felt like a betrayal in itself. "It looks fine to me," I said, but the words lacked conviction, my eyes already tracing the inconsistencies. "No, it's not fine." Minnie's voice was firm, her teacher's instinct kicking in. 30 years grading papers, Ralph. I know handwriting. Naomi's always slanted right ever since she was a girl. Her letters are bold, pressed deep into the page, like she's staking a claim. This, she pointed to my name. Ralph Emerson scrawled across the front. This is too light, too tentative. The pen barely touched the paper. I stared at the letters, irritation prickling at the edges of my fading hope. Maybe she was stressed, I said, grasping at straws. People's handwriting changes when they're upset. Not like this, Minnie countered, her finger tracing the A in my name. Naomi's A's are round like little moons, always have been. This one's pointed sharp like someone trying too hard to mimic her style. She paused, her eyes narrowing. And the F, look at it. Too many loops, too ornate. Naomi's never been that fancy. I wanted to argue, to cling to the possibility that this was Naomi's hand, her heart reaching out to us after 3 years of silence. But the more I looked, the more the differences screamed at me. The spacing was off, the rhythm uneven, the ink too faint, as if the writer had hesitated, unsure of their disguise. Doubt crept in like cold water, seeping into the cracks of my resolve. "You're sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Minnie set the envelope down, her hand steady, but her eyes filled with a quiet sorrow. "I'm sure. This isn't her, Ralph. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make us think it was." The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as the weight of her words sank in. Someone had crafted this letter to deceive us, to prey on our love for Naomi, to exploit the wound that had never healed. The cruelty of it stole my breath, a blade twisted in an old scar. "Who would do this?" I said, my voice cracking. "Who would know enough about us to pull this off?" Minnie didn't answer right away. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on the envelope as if it might speak if she stared long enough. "Someone who knows Naomi's birthday," she said finally. "Someone who knows we haven't spoken to her in 3 years. Someone who knows her handwriting well enough to try to copy it." The implications hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. This wasn't a random scam, a net cast wide to catch desperate parents. This was personal, targeted, a violation that felt like a hand reaching into our home and tearing at its heart. I picked up the envelope again, my fingers tightening around it. "They sent it today," I said, my voice low, almost a growl. "Her 38th birthday. That's no coincidence." "No," Minnie agreed, her voice soft but laced with steel. "It's a message. Someone wanted to hit us where it hurts most." I stood pacing the length of the living room, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The letter felt like a living thing in my hand, pulsing with malice. I stopped by the window, staring out at the quiet Evanston street, where neighbors moved through their evening routines, oblivious to the storm brewing in our house. I was so sure I said more to myself than to Minnie. When I saw her handwriting, I thought she was ready to come back to us. Minnie rose and stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "I know," she said. "I wanted it to be true, too." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. I turned to her, seeing the strength in her eyes, the same strength that had carried us through 3 years of silence, of returned gifts and unanswered calls. "We have to open it," I said, my voice steadier now. "We need to know what they're after." Minnie nodded, though her reluctance was clear. "Whatever it says, it's not going to be good." I sat back down, the envelope heavy in my hands. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the single sheet of paper, inside the crinkle of it loud in the silent room. Minnie leaned against my shoulder, her breath warm and steady, grounding me as I began to read aloud. "Dear Dad." I started, the word Dad catching in my throat like a fishhook. It felt wrong, foreign, not the daddy Naomi had always used in her letters, even as an adult. "Go on," Minnie urged, her voice barely a whisper. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to continue. "I desperately need your help. I'm in the hospital and require emergency surgery that my insurance won't cover. The doctors say I need $15,000 immediately, or I might not survive." My voice faltered, the words landing like stones in my chest. Minnie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Ralph." I pushed through, my anger rising with each line. "I know we haven't talked in years, but you're the only one I can turn to. Please don't let our past disagreements prevent you from saving your daughter's life. I need you to transfer the money to this cryptocurrency wallet." I stumbled over the string of letters and numbers, a cold, impersonal code that felt like a slap. "Time is critical. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning and they won't proceed without payment. I'm sorry it took a crisis to reach out, but I'm desperate. Please help me, Dad. Your loving daughter, Naomi." The letter fell from my hands, fluttering to the coffee table like a dead leaf. I stared at it, my mind reeling. "That's not how she talks," Minnie said, immediately, her voice sharp with certainty. "She never called you Dad in letters. Always Daddy or your name. And cryptocurrency, Naomi's in IT. She'd use a bank transfer, something traceable, not this nonsense." I nodded, disgust coiling in my gut. The letter was a lie crafted to prey on a father's worst fears. It lacked Naomi's warmth, her wit, the little details that made her letters feel like a conversation. This was cold, mechanical, a script, written by someone who didn't know her heart. "It's too formal," I said, picking up the paper again, scanning for anything that felt real. No mention of her job, her life, nothing personal. Just a plea for money. "Exactly," Minnie said, her analytical mind kicking into high gear. "It's like it was written by a machine or someone trying to sound like they know her but getting it all wrong." I leaned back, the weight of the deception pressing down on me. "Who does this?" I said, my voice cracking with rage. "Who targets grieving parents with fake letters from their child?" Minnie's eyes darkened, her teacher's precision giving way to something fiercer. "Someone who knows our pain," she said. "Someone who knows Naomi's name, our address, the exact details of our estrangement. This isn't random, Ralph. They studied us." The realization hit like a punch to the gut. Someone had researched our family, had dug into our lives with surgical precision to craft this cruel hoax. The violation felt almost physical, a trespass into the sacred space of our love for Naomi. $15,000, I said, staring at the number in the letter. "They thought we'd be desperate enough to send it without question." "You were," Minnie said gently, her hand squeezing mine. "5 minutes ago you were ready to call banks to do whatever it took to save her." She was right. The letter had played on my love, my guilt, my aching need to hear from Naomi. I would have emptied our savings, mortgaged the house, anything to believe she needed me again. The scammer had counted on that, had weaponized my heart against me. "I need to know she's okay," I said, standing abruptly. "I need to call her." I grabbed the kitchen phone, its black receiver worn smooth from years of family conversations. My fingers dialed Naomi's number, etched into my memory like a prayer. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then her voicemail clicked on. Her voice, professional and distant, was a knife to my chest. "Naomi, it's your father. Call me back as soon as possible. It's urgent." I hung up and dialed again, pacing the linoleum floor as Minnie watched from the doorway, her arms crossed tightly. Same result. Voicemail. "Naomi, this is urgent. Something's happened. and I need to talk to you right away. Please, sweetheart, call me back." The endearment slipped out, a remnant of better days when she'd call me daddy and mean it. Third try. My hands shook now, a mix of anger and fear. "Naomi, someone's using your name to scam us. They sent a fake letter asking for money pretending to be you. I need to know if you're safe. Call me immediately." I slammed the receiver down, the sound echoing in the quiet kitchen. "She's not answering," I said, though Minnie already knew. What if Ethan's screening her calls? What if she's in trouble? Minnie stepped closer, her hand gentle on my shoulder. "Ralph, your blood pressure. You're getting worked up." "Of course I'm worked up," I snapped, then softened, hating the edge in my voice. "Someone's targeting our family, Minnie, using our daughter's name to steal from us, and she won't even take my call." The letter lay on the counter, its cryptocurrency address, mocking me with its random string of characters. Cold, impersonal, a code that felt like a taunt. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the back door. "I'm going to her apartment." "Ralph." "No, Minnie," said her voice firm. "You know how that ended last time?" "This is different," I said, my resolve hardening. "I'm not going to lecture her about her marriage. I'm going to warn her that someone's using her identity for fraud. She has a right to know." Minnie's eyes searched mine, worry etched into every line of her face. "What if she doesn't believe you? What if she thinks you made this up to force contact?" The possibility stopped me cold. Naomi was smart enough to consider that angle, suspicious enough after 3 years of silence to question my motives. But doing nothing wasn't an option. "Then I'll show her the letter," I said. "Let her see the handwriting that isn't hers, the scam that's too cruel to be real." I headed for the garage door, the envelope tucked into my jacket pocket. I can't just sit here knowing someone's targeting our family. "Be careful," Ralph. Minnie called after me, her voice trembling. "Your heart." "My heart's been broken for 3 years," I said, forcing a grim smile. "A little confrontation won't make it worse." The garage door rattled as I opened it, the cool evening air hitting me like a warning. I slid into the driver's seat, the letter a heavy weight against my chest. As I backed out of the driveway, Minnie's silhouette stood in the window, her face a mask of worry. The road to Lincoln Park stretched ahead, a 45-minute drive through the gathering dusk each mile, pulling me deeper into a mystery I couldn't ignore. Someone had dared to use Naomi's name to hurt us, and I wouldn't rest until I knew who and why. The city's skyline loomed in the distance, its lights flickering like stars in a storm. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, the letter burning a hole in my pocket, its secrets whispering of betrayal and truths yet to be uncovered. The kitchen was a tomb, the air heavy with the weight of betrayal. The torn envelope lay on the coffee table, its edges curling slightly as if shrinking from the truth it held. Minnie stood beside me, her breath shallow, her eyes fixed on the single sheet of paper I'd unfolded moments ago. The words I'd read aloud. "Dear Dad, I desperately need your help," hung between us like a curse, their falseness a blade twisting in my heart. My hands trembled, not with the hope that had briefly consumed me, but with a growing fury. Someone had dared to wear my daughter's name like a mask, and I needed to know what they wanted. "Read it again," Minnie said, her voice low but urgent, as if the words might reveal something new, some hidden clue to the mind behind this deception. She adjusted her glasses, her teacher's instinct kicking in, searching for meaning in the lines as she once did with her students' essays. I nodded, though my throat felt tight, constricted by the weight of what we'd already uncovered. The letter wasn't Naomi's. Minnie's sharp eye had caught the inconsistencies in the handwriting, the leftward slant, the too light pressure, the pointed A's that betrayed the forger's hand. But the contents, the words themselves, were the real poison. I picked up the paper, its crispness mocking the chaos it had unleashed, and began to read aloud again, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Dear Dad." I started the word dad, feeling like a lie on my tongue. Naomi had always called me Daddy in her letters, a small intimacy that carried through even her angriest days. This formality was a stranger's voice, cold and calculated. I desperately need your help. I'm in the hospital and require emergency surgery that my insurance won't cover. The doctors say I need $15,000 immediately, or I might not survive. Minnie's hand flew to her mouth, a soft gasp escaping her. "Oh, Ralph!" Her voice trembled, but her eyes were sharp, dissecting every word as I read. I pushed on each sentence, fueling the anger coiling in my gut. "I know we haven't talked in years, but you're the only one I can turn to. Please don't let our past disagreements prevent you from saving your daughter's life. I need you to transfer the money to this cryptocurrency wallet." I stumbled over the string of letters and numbers, a jarring code that felt like a taunt, impersonal and alien. "Time is critical. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning, and they won't proceed without payment. I'm sorry it took a crisis to reach out, but I'm desperate. Please help me, Dad. Your loving daughter, Naomi." The letter slipped from my fingers, fluttering to the table like a dying moth. I stared at it, my mind reeling, the words echoing in my head like a cruel mockery. "Your loving daughter, Naomi." The phrase was a dagger twisting deeper because it wasn't her. It was a lie crafted to prey on my worst fears, to exploit the love I'd carried through 3 years of silence. "That's not her," Minnie said immediately, her voice cutting through the haze. "She never called you Dad in letters, always Daddy or your name. And cryptocurrency, Naomi's in IT. She'd use a bank transfer, something secure, something traceable. Not this digital nonsense." I nodded, disgust rising like bile. The letter was a hollow shell, lacking Naomi's warmth, her wit, the little quirks that made her letters feel like a conversation across miles. This was a script, cold and mechanical, designed to manipulate a desperate father. "It's too formal," I said, picking up the paper again, scanning for any shred of authenticity. "There's no personality, no mention of her life, her job, nothing that feels like her. Just a demand for money." "Exactly," Minnie said, her analytical mind slicing through the shock. "It's like it was written by someone who doesn't know her, not really. They got the details wrong, her voice, her style. It's a performance, Ralph, and a bad one." I leaned back in the chair, the weight of the deception pressing down on me like a physical force. "Who does this?" I said, my voice cracking with rage. "Who targets a family like this, Minnie? Who knows enough about us to write this, to time it for her birthday, to mimic her handwriting?" Minnie's eyes darkened, her teacher's precision, giving way to something fiercer, a mother's protectiveness. "Someone who knows our pain," she said, her voice steady but laced with steel. "Someone who knows Naomi's name, our address, the exact details of our estrangement. This isn't a random scam, Ralph. They studied us like we're pieces on a chessboard." The realization hit like a thunderclap, reverberating through the quiet room. This wasn't a faceless con, a net cast wide to catch any gullible parent. This was personal, targeted, a violation that felt like a hand reaching into our home and tearing at its heart. 15,000, I said, staring at the number in the letter, my voice low, almost a growl. "They thought we'd be so desperate to hear from her that we'd send it without question." "You were," Minnie said gently, her hand squeezing mine. "10 minutes ago you were ready to call banks to do whatever it took to save her." She was right, and the truth stung. I'd been ready to empty our savings, to mortgage the house, to do anything to believe Naomi needed me again. The scammer had counted on that, had weaponized my love, my guilt, my aching need for reconciliation. I stood pacing the length of the kitchen, the linoleum cool under my feet. "They knew exactly what buttons to push," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and shame. "They knew I'd believe it, at least at first." Minnie rose and stood beside me, her presence a quiet anchor in the storm. "They knew because they've been watching us," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "They knew about her birthday, about the silence between us. They knew how to hurt us most." I stopped pacing, my eyes drawn back to the letter on the table. The cryptocurrency address stared up at me, a string of letters and numbers that felt like a code to a locked door, one I didn't yet have the key to open. "Why cryptocurrency?" I said more to myself than to Minnie. It's untraceable, isn't it? Whoever wrote this didn't want to be found. Exactly, Minnie said, her eyes narrowing. Naomi would never ask for money this way. She'd know better. She'd know it would raise red flags. I picked up the letter again, my fingers tightening around the paper. The words were a carefully constructed trap designed to exploit a father's fear, to prey on the hope I'd clung to for 3 years. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite grasp, like a shadow moving just beyond my vision. This feels bigger than just money, I said, my voice low. It's too precise, too cruel, like they wanted to twist the knife. Minnie nodded, her expression grim. It's not just about the $15,000. It's about control, about knowing they can get inside our heads. The thought sent a chill down my spine. Whoever had written this letter hadn't just studied our family. They'd dissected it, pinpointing the exact place where our hearts were most vulnerable. I sat back down the chair, creaking under my weight, and stared at the letter, searching for answers in its cold, calculated lines. They knew it was her birthday, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They knew we'd be thinking of her today, that we'd be desperate for any sign she was reaching out. Minnie leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly on the table. And they knew enough about her handwriting to try to copy it, she said. That's not something you find online. That's personal. The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. Personal. Someone with access to Naomi's life, to her letters, to the intimate details of our family's fracture. My mind raced, conjuring images of Ethan, his slick charm, his possessive grip on Naomi's shoulder, his cold eyes when I'd confronted him about his gambling. Was he capable of this? Or was there someone else, someone lurking in the shadows, pulling strings we couldn't yet see? I need to know she's safe, I said, standing abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need to call her, make sure this isn't connected to something worse. I grabbed the kitchen phone, its black receiver worn smooth from years of family conversations. My fingers dialed Naomi's number, a reflex born of muscle memory, each digit a prayer she'd answer. The line rang once, twice, 3 times, then her voicemail clicked on. Her voice, professional and distant, was a knife to my chest. Naomi, it's your father. Call me back as soon as possible, it's urgent. I hung up and dialed again, pacing the kitchen, as Minnie watched, her arms crossed tightly. Same result, voicemail. Naomi, this is urgent. Something's happened and I need to talk to you right away. Please, sweetheart, call me back. The endearment slipped out, a ghost of better days, when she'd call me daddy and mean it. 3rd try. My hands shook now, a mix of anger and fear. Naomi, someone's using your name to scam us. They sent a fake letter asking for money, pretending to be you. I need to know if you're safe. Call me immediately. I slammed the receiver down, the sound echoing in the quiet kitchen. She's not answering, I said, though Minnie already knew. What if Ethan's screening her calls? What if she's in trouble? Minnie stepped closer, her hand gentle on my shoulder. Ralph, your blood pressure. You're getting worked up. Of course I'm worked up. I snapped, then softened, hating the edge in my voice. Someone's targeting our family, Minnie. Using our daughter's name to steal from us, and she won't even take my call. The letter lay on the counter, its cryptocurrency address a cold, impersonal taunt. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the back door, my resolve hardening. I'm going to her apartment. Ralph. No. Minnie said, her voice firm but trembling. You know how that ended last time. This is different. I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I'm not going to lecture her about her marriage. I'm going to warn her that someone's using her identity for fraud. She has a right to know. Minnie's eyes searched mine, worry etched into every line of her face. What if she doesn't believe you? What if she thinks you made this up to force contact? The possibility stopped me cold, my hand pausing on the doorknob. Naomi was smart, suspicious, and after 3 years of silence she might see this as a desperate ploy to get back into her life. But doing nothing wasn't an option. Then I'll show her the letter, I said, patting my jacket pocket where the paper rested. Let her see the handwriting that isn't hers, the scam that's too cruel to be real. I stepped into the garage, the cool evening air hitting me like a warning. The letter felt heavy in my pocket, a weight that anchored me to the mystery I was determined to unravel. As I slid into the driver's seat, Minnie's silhouette appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of worry. "Be careful, Ralph," she called, her voice breaking. "Your heart. My heart's been broken for 3 years," I said, forcing a grim smile. "A little confrontation won't make it worse." The engine roared to life and I backed out of the driveway, the letter burning a hole in my pocket. The road to Lincoln Park stretched ahead, a 45-minute drive through the gathering dusk, each mile pulling me deeper into a web of deceit. Someone had dared to use my daughter's name to hurt us, and I wouldn't rest until I knew who and why. As I merged onto Lakeshore Drive, Chicago's skyline loomed in the distance, its lights flickering like stars in a storm. The lake stretched endlessly to my right, its surface glinting under gathering clouds. A storm was coming. I could feel it not just in the air but in the pit of my stomach. This letter wasn't just a scam, it was a message, a challenge. Someone wanted to exploit our pain, and I was determined to find out who. The engine hummed beneath me as I pulled out of the driveway, the letter in my jacket pocket a searing weight against my chest. Minnie's silhouette lingered in the front window, her face etched with worry, a silent plea for me to be careful. The sky above Evanston was bruising with the promise of rain, gray clouds gathering over Lake Michigan, like a warning. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, the road to Lincoln Park stretching ahead, a 45-minute drive that felt like a descent into the unknown. Someone had used my daughter's name to weave a cruel deception, and I was done waiting for answers. The letter's words echoed in my mind, each one a calculated stab. "Dear Dad, I desperately need your help." The handwriting, so close to Naomi's yet so wrong, was a betrayal in itself. Minnie's sharp eye had caught the discrepancies, the leftward slant. The too light pressure, the pointed A's, and the contents had sealed the truth. A demand for $15,000 cloaked in a fake medical emergency sent to a cryptocurrency wallet. It wasn't Naomi. It was someone who knew our family's pain, who timed the letter for her 38th birthday to twist the knife deeper. But who Ethan, with his slick charm and gambling debts, was the obvious suspect. But the precision of the scam felt too cold, too calculated, like a shadow cast by something larger. As I merged onto Lakeshore Drive, Chicago's skyline rose in the distance, its glass towers glinting like knives under the fading light. Traffic was light for a Saturday evening, the usual weekend congestion still hours away. But the open road only gave me more time to think, to let the questions fester. Who had access to Naomi's handwriting? Who knew about our 3-year silence, our estrangement? Who could craft a lie so personal it nearly fooled me? The answers lay in Lincoln Park, in the townhouse where Naomi had built a life without us, and I was determined to find them. The lake stretched endlessly to my right, its surface rippling under the gathering clouds, a mirror to the turmoil in my chest. I replayed the letter's words, searching for clues I might have missed. Emergency surgery. $15,000. Tomorrow morning. The urgency was a trap designed to make me act without thinking, to exploit the love I'd carried through years of silence. But the cryptocurrency address, that string of random letters and numbers, felt like a taunt, a code that hid the writer's identity. Naomi, with her IT expertise, would never use such a method. She'd know it screamed deception. My mind drifted to Ethan, his polished exterior and cold eyes. 3 years ago, I'd stood outside Naomi's apartment trying to warn her about his gambling, the casino receipts I'd found in their car. Won $200 in one night, a glimpse into a spiral I feared would destroy her. She'd chosen him over me, slamming the door in my face, and every attempt to reach her since had been met with silence or Ethan's smug voice telling me to stay away. Was this letter his doing? A desperate move to cover debts, to use our pain for his gain? Or was there someone else, someone watching from the shadows, pulling strings I couldn't yet see? The North Avenue exit came into view, and I turned off the highway, the city's pulse growing louder as I entered Lincoln Park. The neighborhood was a world apart from our modest Evanston home, tree-lined streets, manicured gardens, townhouses that cost more than I'd earned in a decade of engineering work. Naomi had chosen this life, one of success and independence, but at what cost? The thought of her trapped in Ethan's web, isolated from the parents who loved her, fueled my resolve. I found a parking spot 2 blocks from her townhouse, feeding quarters into the meter, with hands that trembled not from fear, but from a fire I hadn't felt in years. The walk would give me time to prepare, to find the words that might reach her without reigniting old wounds. The air was heavy with the scent of impending rain, the distant sounds of a neighborhood barbecue and children's laughter a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Normal lives, normal families, untouched by the shadows that clung to ours. Naomi's townhouse came into view, 3 stories of red brick, with black shutters, a small front garden blooming with flowers I didn't recognize. Expensive, tasteful, everything she'd wanted that Minnie and I couldn't provide when she was growing up. The lights were on, casting a warm glow through the windows, a deceptive promise of welcome. I stood at the bottom of the front steps, staring at the burgundy door with its brass knocker and security panel. 3 years since I'd last stood here. 3 years since she'd chosen Ethan over my warnings. My finger hovered over the doorbell, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. This wasn't about rehashing old fights. This was about protecting her from a lie that wore her name. I pressed the button, the chime echoing through the house like a summons. Footsteps approached, quick, light, the kind I remembered from Naomi's childhood, when she'd raced to the door to greet me after a long day. The peephole darkened, then lightened, as if someone had looked through and hesitated. Locks turned and the door opened. Naomi stood there, older but unmistakable. Her dark hair was shorter, styled in a sleek bob that made her look both sophisticated and distant. She wore a casual dress, its elegance a reminder of the life she'd built without us. Her eyes widened, caught between surprise and wariness. "Dad." The word was flat, neither welcoming nor hostile, just a question hanging in the air. "Hello, Naomi," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to ask you something important." Her brow furrowed, her arms crossing like a shield. "What are you doing here?" Her tone was guarded, a wall already rising between us. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulling out the letter, its edges worn from my grip. "Did you write this?" I held it out, watching her eyes scan the handwriting, confusion replacing her initial suspicion. She took the letter, her fingers brushing mine, a fleeting connection that sent a pang through my chest. Her gaze darted over the envelope, the familiar loops of her name, our address. "I didn't write this," she said, her voice sharp with certainty. "Where did you get it?" "It came today," I said, watching her closely. "On your birthday." Her eyes flicked to mine, a flash of hurt crossing her face. "Dad, I haven't written to you in 3 years. This isn't mine." "Then who did?" I asked, my tone sharper than I'd intended. "Who would forge your handwriting to ask for $15,000? Her expression hardened, suspicion creeping back in. "You tell me. You're the one who brought it here." "I'm not accusing you, Naomi," I said, softening my voice, trying to bridge the gulf between us. "I'm trying to protect you. Someone used your name, your handwriting, to scam us. They knew about our estrangement, your birthday, everything." Behind her, a shadow moved in the hallway. Ethan stepped into view, his expensive casual clothes a stark contrast to the tension in the air. His hair was perfectly styled, his smile practiced, but his eyes were cold, calculating. "Naomi." "Who is it?" he asked, though his gaze locked on mine as if he'd been expecting me. "My father," Naomi said, her voice tight. "Apparently someone's been sending fake letters from me asking for money." Ethan's face showed concern, but something flickered in his eyes, too quick, too guarded, like a predator caught in the open. "That sounds like a scam," he said smoothly, stepping closer to Naomi, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. "You should report it to the police, Ralph." "Maybe I will," I said, studying him, searching for any crack in his facade. "Strange coincidence, though. $15,000. That's about what someone might lose in a bad night at the casino. His jaw tightened just for a moment before his smile returned slick as oil. I wouldn't know anything about that, he said, his voice too calm, too practiced. Dad? That's enough, Naomi said, stepping closer to Ethan, her body language protective, a knife to my heart. You can't just show up here making accusations. I'm not accusing, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I'm asking questions. Someone targeted our family, Naomi. Someone who knows us, who knows your handwriting, your birthday, the fact that we haven't spoken in 3 years. Anyone could find that information online these days, Ethan said dismissively, his hand tightening slightly on Naomi's shoulder. Could they? I countered, my eyes locked on his. Could they find samples of Naomi's handwriting? Could they know the exact details of our estrangement? Naomi's eyes darted between us, uncertainty creeping in a crack in the wall she'd built. Dad, you need to leave, she said, her voice final, but there was a tremor in it, a hint of doubt. I didn't write that letter. I don't know who did, and I can't help you figure it out. Can't or won't I? Asked the words, slipping out before I could stop them, echoing our fight 3 years ago. She started to close the door, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Don't come back without calling first. I tried calling, I said, my voice breaking. 3 times. You didn't answer. Then take the hint. The door closed with a soft but definitive click, the sound echoing like a gunshot in my chest. I stood there staring at the polished wood, willing it to open again for Naomi to see the truth, to see me. But it remained shut, a barrier as solid as the one she'd built around her heart. I turned and walked back to my car, the letter still in my pocket, its weight heavier now, a reminder of my failure. The evening air was thick with the promise of rain, the neighborhood's laughter and music a cruel contrast to the silence that followed me. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. Naomi hadn't written the letter, that much was clear. Her confusion, her hurt had been genuine. But Ethan's reaction, the flicker in his eyes, the way he'd positioned himself between us like a guard dog protecting his territory, set my nerves on edge. He was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. The drive back to Evanston was a blur, the city's lights streaking past like tears I refused to shed. I replayed the conversation, searching for clues in Ethan's words, his body language. That fleeting moment when I'd mentioned the casino, the way his jaw had tightened, was a tell. He knew more than he was letting on, and the letter felt like his handiwork, a desperate move to cover debts, to exploit our pain for his gain. But there was something else, a nagging sense that the scam was too precise, too personal, like a puzzle with pieces I couldn't yet see. As I pulled into our driveway, Minnie was waiting at the door, her face pale in the porch light. What happened? She asked, her voice trembling. She didn't write it, I said, stepping inside the letter, still burning a hole in my pocket. She didn't know anything about it. But Ethan, I trailed off, the weight of his name heavy on my tongue. He's hiding something, Minnie. I saw it in his eyes. She nodded, her expression grim. We need to find out who did this, Ralph, and why. I sank into the kitchen chair, the letter on the table between us, its secrets whispering of betrayal and truths yet to be uncovered. The storm was coming, and I was ready to face it, no matter the cost. The drive back from Lincoln Park was a descent into a fog of rage and doubt, the city's lights blurring into streaks of gold and crimson as rain began to speckle the windshield. The letter, still tucked in my jacket pocket, felt like a live wire, its weight a constant reminder of the betrayal it carried. Naomi's face, her confusion, her hurt, the way she'd stood by Ethan as he deflected my questions, haunted me. She hadn't written the letter, that much was certain. Her denial had been genuine, raw, but Ethan's reaction, that fleeting flicker of unease in his eyes, told a different story. He was hiding something, and I was determined to uncover it. I pulled into our Evanston driveway, just as the rain turned heavy, drumming against the roof of the car like an impatient summons. Minnie was waiting at the door, her silhouette framed by the warm glow of the porch light, her face pale with worry. I stepped inside the letter, burning a hole in my pocket, and met her eyes. She didn't write it. I said, my voice rough with exhaustion and anger. She didn't know anything about it. But Ethan, I trailed off, the weight of his name heavy on my tongue. He's involved, Minnie. I saw it in his eyes. Minnie closed the door behind me, her hands trembling slightly as she took my wet jacket. What happened? She asked, her voice steady but laced with fear. Tell me everything. We sat at the kitchen table, the letter between us like a dark artifact. The rain pounded outside, a relentless rhythm that matched the storm in my chest. I recounted every detail, the way Naomi's confusion had turned to suspicion, the way Ethan had stepped between us, his smile too smooth, his words too practiced. When I mentioned the casino, I said his jaw tightened just for a second. He covered it fast, but I saw it. He knows something. Minnie's eyes narrowed, her teacher's mind dissecting my words. He's always been good at hiding, she said, her voice low. But a letter like this, it's bold even for him. I nodded, my fingers tracing the edges of the letter. The handwriting so close to Naomi's, yet so wrong, was a puzzle I couldn't stop turning over in my mind. The leftward slant, the too light pressure, the pointed A's. Minnie had caught it all. And now I saw it too. But it was more than the handwriting. The letter's contents, the demand for $15,000, the cryptocurrency wallet, the timing on Naomi's birthday, it was all too precise, too personal. This wasn't random, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Whoever wrote this knew us, knew Naomi's birthday, our estrangement, her handwriting. Who else but Ethan? Minnie leaned back, her hands clasped tightly on the table. He's the obvious choice, she said, her tone cautious. He's close to her, has access to her life, her letters. He'd know how to mimic her style, or at least try. And the money? She paused, her eyes darkening. You said he had gambling debts. $15,000 could cover a bad night, maybe more. I stood pacing the kitchen, the linoleum cool under my feet. The idea of Ethan crafting this letter using Naomi's name to exploit us made my blood boil. I remembered the casino receipts I'd found in their car 3 years ago. Won $200 in one night, a glimpse into a spiral I'd tried to pull Naomi from. He'd lied, then calling it client entertainment. And he was lying now. But this wasn't just about money. This was about control, about twisting our pain to his advantage. I stopped by the window, staring out at the rain-slicked street, the world blurred by water and shadow. He's been isolating her, I said, my voice low. Every time I tried to reach her, calls, letters, visits. He was there blocking me. The returned gifts, the unanswered voicemails. It was him, Minnie. He's been cutting her off from us, and now this. Minnie rose and stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. But why now? She asked. Why go to the trouble of forging a letter? If he's desperate for money, there are easier ways. Her question hung in the air, a thread I hadn't yet unraveled. I turned back to the table, picking up the letter again, my eyes scanning the cold, calculated words. Emergency surgery. $15,000 tomorrow morning. The urgency was a trap designed to make us act without thinking, but the cryptocurrency address, that string of random letters and numbers, felt like a key to a locked door. It's untraceable, I said, more to myself than to Minnie. That's why he chose it. No paper trail, no way to link it back to him. Minnie nodded, her expression grim. Naomi would never use cryptocurrency, she said. She's too smart for that. She'd know it's a red flag. Exactly, I said, my resolve hardening. This has Ethan written all over it. The amount, the timing, the way it plays on our guilt. He knows how much we miss her, how desperate we'd be to believe she's reaching out. I sat back down, the letter in my hands, and let my mind piece together the puzzle. Ethan had access to Naomi's life. Her old letters, her journals, maybe even her work documents. He could have studied her handwriting, practiced it, though not well enough to fool Minnie's eagle eye. He knew about our estrangement, our attempts to reconnect the gifts we'd sent that came back unopened. He knew Naomi's birthday, knew it would be a day when our hearts were most vulnerable. And he knew about his own debts, the kind that could drive a man to desperate measures. But there was something else, a nagging doubt, that tugged at the edges of my certainty. The letter was bold, yes, but it was also sloppy. The handwriting was off the tone, too formal, the cryptocurrency address, a glaring mistake for someone like Naomi. If Ethan was behind this, why hadn't he been more careful? Or was the sloppiness intentional, a way to make us doubt ourselves, to keep us off balance? I looked at Minnie, her face pale but resolute. What if it's not just Ethan? I said, the thought slipping out before I could stop it. What if someone else is involved, someone pulling his strings? Minnie's brow furrowed, her teacher's mind turning over the possibility. Like who, she asked. Who else would know this much about us? I don't know, I admitted, my voice low. But this feels bigger than just a gambling debt. The letter's too personal, too cruel. Like they wanted to hurt us, not just take our money. The rain pounded harder outside, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pulse in my temples. I stood again, unable to sit still, and walked to the kitchen counter where the phone sat silent. I'd called Naomi 3 times before driving to her apartment, each voicemail a plea for her to call me back to confirm she was safe. She hadn't answered, and now, after our confrontation, I doubted she would. Ethan's presence had been a barrier, his smooth deflection a wall between us. But I wasn't done. I need to know more, I said, turning to Minnie. About Ethan, about his debts, about who he's been talking to. If he's behind this, he'll slip up eventually. He's not as smart as he thinks. Minnie nodded, her eyes steady. We need to be smart about this, Ralph. No more rushing in. If Ethan's involved, he's already on guard after your visit. We need to watch, wait, and find proof. Her words were a lifeline, grounding me in the face of my own impulsiveness. She was right. Storming back to Naomi's apartment would only push her further away, give Ethan more ammunition to paint me as the villain. I needed evidence, something concrete to show Naomi, to break through the lies he'd woven around her. I sat back down, my hands clasped tightly on the table. The letter's our starting point, I said. It's proof someone's targeting us. If we can trace it, where it was mailed, who had access to Naomi's handwriting, we might find a lead. Minnie leaned forward, her analytical mind kicking into gear. The postmark, she said, reaching for the envelope. She held it up to the light, her eyes scanning the faint ink. It's from Chicago downtown post office. That doesn't narrow it down much, but it means it was mailed locally. Ethan could have dropped it off, I said, my voice hardening. He works downtown, doesn't he? Some finance job, always in those shiny suits. Minnie nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. It's possible, but we need more than a hunch. We need to know who he's been talking to, where he's been going. I thought back to our confrontation, the way Ethan's eyes had flickered when I mentioned the casino. It was a tell, a crack in his armor. He's in debt, I said. I'd bet my life on it. Those casino receipts I found 3 years ago, they weren't a one-time thing. He's been bleeding money, and Naomi's been paying the price. Minnie's hand squeezed mine, her touch, a reminder of the strength we drew from each other. Then we start there, she said. We find out how deep his debts are, who he owes. If he's desperate enough to forge a letter, he's desperate enough to leave a trail. I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. I wasn't a detective, just a retired engineer with a knack for fixing things, but I'd always been good at solving puzzles. This was no different, just a darker kind of puzzle, one with my daughter's life at stake. I'll start with the casino, I said. If he's still gambling, someone there might know something. And I'll check his office, see if anyone's heard anything about debts or shady deals. Minnie's eyes widened, worry creeping back in. Ralph, that's dangerous. If he's involved with the wrong people, I'll be careful, I promised, though the fire in my chest made caution feel like a luxury I couldn't afford. But I can't sit here while he uses Naomi's name to hurt us. I won't let him win. The rain slowed to a drizzle, the world outside softening as the storm passed. I looked at the letter again, its words a challenge I was ready to meet. Ethan was the key, I was sure of it. His debts, his lies, his control over Naomi, it all pointed to him. But I needed proof, something, to show Naomi to pull her out of his grasp before it was too late. I stood my resolve hardening like steel. "Tomorrow I start digging," I said. "I'll find out what he's hiding and I'll bring our daughter back." Minnie rose her hand, finding mine, her eyes fierce with determination. "We'll do it together," she said. "Whoever did this, they underestimated us. They thought they could break us, but they're wrong." I squeezed her hand, the letter on the table a silent vow between us. Ethan might think he'd won, but I was just getting started. The truth was out there, hidden in the shadows of his lies, and I would find it no matter the cost. The rain had stopped, leaving Evanston cloaked in a damp, quiet aftermath. The kitchen was dark now, save for the soft glow of the lamp on the counter, casting long shadows across the letter that still lay on the table, a silent accusation, a puzzle I'd vowed to solve. 3 days had passed since my confrontation with Naomi in Lincoln Park. 3 days of restless nights and unanswered questions. Ethan's face haunted me, his too smooth smile, the flicker of unease when I'd mentioned the casino. I was certain he was behind the letter, the forged handwriting, the cruel demand for $15,000. But certainty wasn't proof, and without proof I risked pushing Naomi further away. Minnie and I had spent those 3 days strategizing, piecing together what we knew. The letter's postmark from a downtown Chicago post office pointed to someone local, someone with access to Naomi's life. Ethan was the obvious suspect, his gambling debts, his control over her, the way he'd positioned himself between us during our confrontation. But there was a nagging doubt, a shadow at the edge of my certainty. The letter was sloppy, the handwriting flawed, the cryptocurrency demand a glaring mistake for someone like Naomi, who'd built her career in IT. Was Ethan that careless? Or was there another hand at work manipulating him as he manipulated her? I'd spent the morning calling old contacts, men I'd worked with in engineering, who knew the city's underbelly. One, a retired private investigator named Carl, had promised to ask around about Ethan's gambling habits to see if any casinos or loan sharks had his name. "Give me a day or two," Carl had said, his voice gruff over the phone. "If he's in debt, someone's talking." Minnie, meanwhile, had been combing through public records online, looking for any trace of Ethan's financial troubles. Liens, bankruptcies, anything that might confirm our suspicions. We were a team united by a shared mission to protect our daughter, to pull her from the web Ethan had spun around her. But the waiting was torture. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the letter, its words burned into my mind. "Dear Dad, I desperately need your help." The lie was a wound, raw and deep, but it had also ignited something in me, a fire I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just a retired engineer, a father broken by 3 years of silence. I was a man with a purpose, and I wouldn't let Ethan, or whoever was behind this, win. The doorbell rang sharp and sudden, shattering the quiet. I glanced at Minnie, who was washing dishes at the sink, her hands pausing mid-motion. "Who could that be?" she asked, drying her hands on a towel, her voice tinged with unease. It was nearly 8 p.m., too late for casual visitors. I stood, my heart thudding, and crossed to the front door. The porch light cast a soft glow through the window, and when I peered through the peephole, my breath caught. Naomi stood there, her dark hair damp from the drizzle, her face pale but resolute. She carried a small duffel bag slung over one shoulder, and her eyes, those same eyes that used to light up at birthday cakes, were wide with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or resolve. I opened the door, my voice barely a whisper. "Naomi." "Hi, Daddy," she said, the word a lifeline, pulling me back to a time before Ethan, before the silence. Her voice trembled, but her gaze was steady, locked on mine. "Can I come in?" "Of course," I said, stepping aside, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. Minnie appeared behind me, her gasp soft but audible. "Naomi," she said, her voice breaking as she rushed forward, pulling our daughter into a hug. Naomi stiffened for a moment, then melted into her mother's embrace, her duffel bag dropping to the floor with a thud. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice muffled against Minnie's shoulder. I'm so sorry. I stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever fragile moment this was. 3 years of silence, of returned gifts and unanswered calls, and now she was here in our home, her presence a miracle I hadn't dared hope for. What's going on, sweetheart? I asked, my voice gentle, though my mind raced with questions. She pulled back from Minnie, wiping her eyes, and looked at me. The letter, she said, her voice steady now, though it carried a weight I hadn't heard before. You were right. It wasn't me. It was Ethan. The name landed like a stone in my chest, confirmation of the suspicion I'd carried since the letter arrived. But hearing it from her, seeing the pain in her eyes, made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. Tell me everything, I said, guiding her to the living room where the letter still sat on the coffee table, a silent witness to our family's fracture. We sat, Naomi on the couch, Minnie and I in the armchairs across from her, the air thick with anticipation. She took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and began. After you left the other night, I couldn't stop thinking about the letter, she said. You showing up saying someone had forged my handwriting, it threw me. I didn't want to believe you because that would mean admitting I'd been blind to something right in front of me. But I couldn't let it go. She reached into her duffel bag and pulled out a stack of papers, yellowed and creased, as if they'd been handled too many times. I started looking through Ethan's things, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. I know it sounds awful going through his desk, his files, but I had to know, and I found these. She spread the papers on the table and my heart stopped. They were practice sheets, pages filled with attempts to mimic her handwriting. Loops and swirls, some too tight, some too loose, but all unmistakably trying to replicate the careful script I'd once known so well. My name, Ralph Emerson, appeared over and over, each attempt closer to the letter's handwriting, but never quite right. The pointed A's, the leftward slant, the too light pressure, it was all there, a confession written in ink. Minnie leaned forward, her eyes scanning the pages, her teacher's precision kicking in. These are his, she said, her voice steady but laced with fury. He was practicing, trying to get it right. Naomi nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. There was more, she said. I found a draft of the letter in his desk, crumpled up like he'd tried to throw it away but couldn't. It was almost word for word what you showed me, but with corrections like he was refining it. And there were others, drafts of more letters addressed to you asking for more money. My stomach twisted, the betrayal sinking deeper. More letters, I asked, my voice rough. He was planning to keep going. Naomi's jaw tightened, her voice breaking. Yes, I confronted him last night. He didn't deny it. He said he owed $37,000 to some people from the casino. People who don't take kindly to late payments. He thought he could get the money from you that you'd pay to save me without asking questions. I stood pacing the room, my hands clenched into fists. The fire I'd felt these past few days roared to life, fueled by the image of Ethan sitting at his desk, forging my daughter's handwriting, using her name to prey on our love. He thought he could manipulate us, I said, my voice trembling with rage. He thought we wouldn't notice. Naomi's eyes met mine, filled with a pain that mirrored my own. I was so stupid, she said, her voice cracking. I believed in him, Daddy. I chose him over you, over Mom, because I thought he loved me. But all this time he was using me, isolating me, making me think you were the problem. Minnie reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. You're not stupid, sweetheart, she said, her voice soft but firm. You loved him. That's not a fault. It's a strength. Naomi shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I should have listened to you, she said, looking at me. 3 years ago, when you tried to warn me about his gambling, I pushed you away. I was so angry, so sure I knew better. But you were right. The words were a balm, soothing a wound I'd carried for years, but they also broke my heart. I crossed the room and knelt beside her, taking her other hand. Naomi, I never stopped loving you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Not for a single day. I just wanted to protect you. She nodded, her tears falling faster now. "I know that now," she said. "I'm so sorry, Daddy, for everything." I pulled her into a hug, her familiar scent, lavender, and something uniquely, her flooding me with memories of birthday mornings and park picnics. Minnie joined us, her arms wrapping around us both, and for the first time in 3 years we were whole again, a family reunited in the wreckage of Ethan's lies. When we finally pulled apart, Naomi wiped her eyes, her resolve returning. "I'm leaving him," she said, her voice steady now. "I told him last night after he admitted everything. I packed a bag and came here. I need to stay somewhere safe until I figure out what's next." "You're staying right here," Minnie said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "This is your home." Naomi's lips trembled, a small smile breaking through. "Thank you," she whispered. I stood, my mind still reeling from her revelations. "What did Ethan say when you confronted him?" I asked, needing to know how deep his deception ran. She took a deep breath, her hands tightening around the practice sheets. "He tried to lie at first, said it was a misunderstanding. But when I showed him the papers, he broke down. He said the casino debts were worse than he'd told me, that he'd borrowed from some dangerous people. He thought the letter was an easy way to get quick money that you'd pay because you'd feel guilty about our fight." Guilty, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "He used our love for you as a weapon." Naomi nodded, her eyes dark with regret. "He said he was going to send more letters, keep asking for money, until he was clear of the debt. He didn't care how it would hurt you, how it would hurt me. He just wanted out." The room felt colder, Ethan's betrayal, a shadow that lingered even in his absence. I picked up the letter from the table, its words now a confession of his greed. "We need to burn this," I said, my voice steady. "It's a lie and it doesn't belong here." Naomi's eyes widened, but she nodded, a spark of determination in her gaze. "Yes," she said. "Let's do it." We moved to the backyard where the rain had left the grass slick and the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. Minnie brought a small metal fire pit from the garage, and I lit a match, the flames small but fierce in the darkness. I held the letter over the fire, its edges curling as the flames took hold, consuming the forged words, the fake plea, the pain it had caused. Naomi added the practice sheets, watching as they burned, her face illuminated by the flickering light. "It's over," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "He doesn't get to control me anymore." As the last of the papers turned to ash, I felt a weight lift, a burden I'd carried for 3 years dissolving in the fire. We stood there, the three of us, watching the flames die down, the night quiet around us. "Come inside," Minnie said, her hand on Naomi's shoulder. "Let's look at some old photos, remember the good times." We returned to the living room where Minnie pulled out the family albums, their pages worn from years of love. We sat on the couch, Naomi between us, and flipped through memories: her first birthday, her high school graduation, the summer we'd spent building a treehouse in the backyard. Laughter came easily, filling the room with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Naomi's smile, tentative at first, grew brighter with each page, her hand resting in mine, as we remembered who we were. "I'm not letting you go again," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "No matter what happens, we're family." Naomi nodded, her eyes shining. "I know, Daddy. I'm not going anywhere." As the night deepened, we made plans. Naomi would stay with us until she found a new place. She'd file for divorce, start fresh. The future felt uncertain, but for the first time in years it also felt possible. The letter, now ash, was a reminder of the pain we'd overcome, but also of the strength we'd found together. I looked at Minnie, her face soft in the lamplight, and at Naomi, her resolve a mirror of her mother's. We'd faced betrayal, unraveled a mystery, and come out stronger. Ethan had thought he could break us, but he'd underestimated the love that bound us, the fire that burned brighter than his lies. As I lay in bed that night, Naomi asleep in her old room, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The storm was over, and in its wake we'd found our way back to each other.